And a very warm welcome back to you, dear audience. Next on today's agenda is Session 1, entitled Transforming to the Digital Era and Where Do We Stand Today? This session will be a one-on-one discussion on where the Kingdom of Bahrain stands at this digital era. Please join me in welcoming onto the stage once again founder and CEO of Falak Consultancy, Mr. Suhail Algosaibi. Also joining us is the Managing Director at the Bahrain Economic Development Board, Dr. Simon Galpin.
I have a very, very distinguished gentleman sitting next to me, someone who's very good at what he does. He's Dr. Simon Galpin, the Managing Director of the Economic Development Board, someone I consider a good friend and an honorary citizen of Bahrain because of all the things you're doing for our country. Thank you for all your efforts. The theme today is emerging technologies. We're hearing the words MTech, we're hearing the words blockchain, we're hearing all these buzzwords and so on. Some of us understand it more than others. How satisfied or unsatisfied are you in how Bahrain is performing on the digital transformation sort of horizon? And the follow-up question to that is, how happy or unhappy are you with the way we rank in some of these indices? So first question is, digital transformation in Bahrain, how satisfied or not satisfied are you?
Partially satisfied, because we've come a long way from what was quite a low base, but of course we still have a long way to go. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that nearly every other economy is trying to do exactly the same thing. So this is really a race to make sure that Bahrain is equipped for this new digital age, this Industry 4.0, and we need to do a lot of things quite fast. In terms of rankings, I mean, rankings are important for some people, for economic developers and so on. I don't think companies necessarily look too much at rankings. It's more about what opportunities can they actually achieve or reach by being in a new economy. So rankings we keep an eye on. What we've really got to keep an eye on, though, is whether the companies that we're bringing in are satisfied with the pace of development and whether they're expanding and upgrading their presence here in Bahrain.
So I started my first business in 2002. A very, very different landscape. One of my CRs, commercial registrations, took 9 months to get, and another one took about 12 months to get. And the reason is because, so I had different fields that I've had businesses in. One was in health and fitness and this area. And so I would need to get approval from the municipality, the Ministry of Health, the General Organization for Youth and Sport, which now doesn't exist anymore. From the, of course, the CR comes from the ministry itself, Ministry of Commerce, and then I needed approval, if it's in martial arts, the Bahrain Martial Arts Federation, and the Ministry of Interior. Okay. Now, if you can imagine, so that's 6 different bodies. One body delays you, if they each delay on average of 1 week, that's 6 weeks, which was not unusual. If each delays you 2 or 3 weeks, that's, you can imagine the delays that happen. So I remember we would follow up with the municipality at the time and say, when is the approval ready? They would say, well, the engineer is on holiday. He can't come back to sign the paper. When he comes, is there no one else who can sign it? No, we have to wait for the engineer to come back from holiday. So this was the landscape back then. It was extremely, extremely frustrating. So the ministry always said it takes us 5 minutes to issue, or no, those days it was 5 days to issue the CR. And those days it was 5 days. But 5 days for them, not all the other things. Tell us how this has changed over the years. What is new now in this sphere?
Well, initially we looked at employing technology. So the Sigilat system was the first attempt to bring it all together, to do an online registration process. It's taken us half the way. Now we have a team working very closely with the Ministry of Industry to really try to look at developing a Sigilat 2.0. To make sure that it's much more business-friendly in terms of the registration processes. We've got a long way to go, though, all right? But I think we've come a long way. I think what we've got to be cognizant of is not just each municipality or each ministry looking at just their bit. I think the EDB's job is to look at the whole journey. What is the whole experience of an investor from the start to the finish? And it's all very well for one part of that process to be done in 1 or 2 days, but if the rest of it takes 6 weeks, and that's not what an investor expects, then that's an issue. From my perspective, I don't think companies will not come to Bahrain because it takes 4 weeks instead of 2 weeks to register a company. What frustrates them is the fact that they can't always predict how long it will take, or they can't always predict how many steps.
And that's very
adding an element of predictability is very important. But this isn't really going to be the thing that changes Bahrain. What we need to focus on are what is the physical infrastructure, the soft infrastructure that will really open up new sectors, new elements of the economy that will force people to take another look at Bahrain and start new businesses here.
One of the things I obsess about, there's a few things I obsess about. One of them is innovation, dialogue and reconciliation, and education. So I honestly speaking, I know there's some people from the Ministry of Education here. I don't know if they're still here. But I honestly am concerned about the gap between the private schools and the public schools. And I wonder, is the Bahraini 18-year-old graduate ready for the 21st century? Do they have the skill set and the mindset to enter this? Will they still be relevant? We don't want them to be one of the 2/3 that will become less relevant. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, this isn't unique to Bahrain, right? I mean, I think every country in the world is looking at whether they are equipping their next generations to make sure that they can benefit from, compete in what will be a very different economy in the future. And we as parents have that challenge, right? Do our children have the right skill sets to enable them to really and truly benefit from what's happening with AI and machine learning? I think conventional wisdom is, everybody's got to focus much more on STEM subjects: science, technology, engineering, maths. Some economies are looking at introducing coding at primary school and preschool. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that isn't the whole story. Because I was asked at an event in Tianjin a few weeks ago, what types of jobs are going to be available for our children? And it's almost impossible to predict. But I think that, if I can digress for 1 second, I think that in some ways the homogeneity of technology is something that there could be a backlash against. I think that, not everybody is going to be satisfied with talking to a chatbot. I think that people are going to crave interaction with other human beings. So the skills that will always be necessary are good interpersonal and communication skills. I think that there is a craving for creativity. So it's not just about giving people technical skills. It's ensuring that young people have the right education that gives them access to developing their creativity. Because, again, nobody's going to queue up to see a Mona Lisa that's been painted by a robot. I think there will be a backlash towards people wanting direct communication with real individuals, and there will always be a demand for creativity. So those types of skills, I think, will be relevant in the future as well.
Some years ago, I had the privilege of doing a course in the MIT Enterprise Forum. And one of the speakers was the editor of the MIT Technology Review. And this is now a couple of years ago. And he spoke about the 20 top technologies that were, or 10 top technologies that they were watching at the time. And he mentioned that there was some medical technology, and I forget what the details were. He thought that conventional wisdom assumed, or the general scientific consensus rather, assumed that this breakthrough was 20 years away. And it was developed in 2 years. If we look at the advent of self-driving cars, up to, let's say, maybe 5-6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago now, this was thought to be way too complex for a computer ever to master. But now we have them. The technology of airplanes flying themselves has been around now for a very, very long time. So I wonder if I agree with you, because if eventually a chatbot might be more articulate than a human being, right? Because now they can play chess better than a human being, they can do other things better. It's only a matter of time until they can show programs that look and feel genuine, like genuine emotion. So I wonder, will people really crave it, or if something that feels the same will be good enough?
No, I think authenticity is a key thing here.
Authenticity.
Yeah, I think that people will crave that authenticity of talking to a real human being. I mean, things are becoming so standardized. I mean, if I take out my phone now, can anybody tell if this is a Huawei, a Samsung, or an Apple phone from that distance?
I can tell from here.
But if I was doing this a few years ago and I was holding up, say, a Motorola, a Nokia, or a BlackBerry, even people at the back could probably tell. Things are getting so samey on one hand. And I think that there could be a backlash. I think people crave authenticity. I think the millennials crave authenticity in terms of experience. And that implies a personalized approach.
I think one of the things that our young people, we need to train them, whether it's in school or universities. I agree with what you just said, but I think the most important thing, or one of the very important things, is adaptability. Really, you have to develop this ability to adapt, meaning learning new skills when necessary, and that mindset. I think Bahrain making good efforts in education, I'm talking about primary education, but I think the mindset is missing. We need that critical thinking mindset, that adaptability, and I worry, to be honest, about this. Kids are adopting new technologies because they're part of their everyday life. Now, you see a 2-year-old, he already knows how to use an iPad, right? But does he, as he goes through the school system, will he be able to think enough independently and be adaptable? This really concerns me. And you said it's not just Bahrain. Where else are they worried about this?
Oh, everywhere, honestly.
When you go, you hear that same conversation.
Absolutely. It's the same conversation happening in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in mainland China. You know, it's a concern for everybody. And I don't think anybody's got the right answer just yet. But what we are trying to do here, of course, is create a startup ecosystem, a startup culture in Bahrain. And this is a good way of bringing in perhaps a slightly different approach to starting new businesses. I mean, we've always had a large number of entrepreneurs, a large number of SMEs. But when we talk about startups here in Bahrain, we're talking about a very select group of small businesses that use digital technology, that are born global and want to expand beyond the borders of Bahrain very quickly, and have the ambition to grow at a very, very rapid rate. And the energy that comes from surrounding yourself by these types of businesses is something that our traditional SMEs can benefit from, but also big multinationals that are finding it difficult to recruit talent, can get access to that talent by getting closer to the startup ecosystems in Bahrain and elsewhere. And so many of the accelerators that have opened in the last 2 or 3 years are also looking at how we can connect our corporates with some of the startup founders and teams that are emerging in Bahrain or coming to Bahrain from elsewhere in the region.
I would agree 100%. And again, back when I started in 2002, it was almost aggressive towards entrepreneurs. I mean, it wasn't intentionally as such, but it was so many hurdles. It's almost, you know, a friend of mine wanted to start an IT business. I think it was even a website business. And they asked him, where's your degree in computer science? He said, I'm a trained aircraft engine engineer. Okay, I don't have a degree, but I have an aircraft engine maintenance certificate. Yeah. So that surely qualifies me. And they said, no, you can't open a web business. You know, that kind of stuff, that really, it was, the mindset shift took such a long time to happen. And I'm so happy it did happen. One thing that also concerns me is that here in the Arab world, is that, yes, we've created the Kareem types of this world. There's the various food apps that we see now, be it Hunger Station or be it the other famous one, forgive me now for not remembering it, you have Carriage and one or two other ones. But fundamentally, we haven't created the telephone, the smartphone that the apps run on. We've not created the programming language that the apps are based on. We have big airlines in the Middle East. We've not created the engines that they run on. So I'm always wondering about the transfer of technology, right? Can we not have a transfer of technology? Because at the end of the day, the advantage still lies with the people that create the technology rather than final consumers of this technology. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think we should beat ourselves up. I mean, most economies don't have, developers of jet engines and the core technology that we use today. It doesn't mean that we can't have a thriving startup ecosystem, building on the experience, building on the track record that other economies have delivered. And for most economies, it's okay to localize an idea that started in the United States or China and then adapt it and roll it out in the Middle East. Talabat and the other companies you mentioned have been very successful doing that. It's a good start. It's still creating jobs. It's still creating economic benefit. It's still providing consumer choice for the people that live here. So, we have to be realistic. We need to walk before we can run. But I think that attracting startups that are going to use and adapt this type of technology isn't a bad thing. It's a good start, a good fundamental.
Again, I'm constantly comparing. I'm making myself sound very old. I'm not that old. So in 2002, when I started my first business, I was 9. So I honestly, I have to agree with you. When I see the ecosystem, I'm very much excited. And I love seeing the enthusiasm of some of these young Bahrainis that we see here, the businesses that they want to start, the energy that they have, these accelerators and startup incubators that are here. I think this is very, very good. In your view, how are we compared with our neighbors? Do you think, because you mentioned it more than once, others are doing the same. Are you happy with this? Do you think there's more to do, or they need to catch up with us? What do you think?
I think we're doing very well. I mean, I often talk about ecosystems, and I genuinely believe that, startup ecosystems and natural ecosystems derive their attributes from the environment that they're in, right? So Bahrain's ecosystem doesn't have to be the same as Dubai's or Saudi's or Kuwait's. But I think we've got a really good balance here. We've got a really good balance between support and involvement from government organizations such as the EDB and Tamkeen and others, but also from the actual business community. So we've got a really good balance there. We've got a good balance between having startup founders and entrepreneurs that are homegrown from Bahrain and those that have come from Saudi and elsewhere, coming to Bahrain, working together to really grow the ecosystem. And it's probably the most healthy, diverse mix of founder teams in terms of nationality that you would find in any part of the GCC. So that's really healthy. We've also got, when it comes to fintech, another secret weapon, and that is that we've been a financial center for 20, 30 years. And 60% of people working in that financial industry here in Bahrain are Bahrainis. So we've got Bahrainis that have decades of financial service experience. And that's a tremendous pool that fintech companies can draw on. They know what's going on inside the financial services industry, and it's a great pool of talent that they can recruit and draw on when they're setting up fintech firms. If you look at other parts, if you go to DIFC, not too many Emiratis there. Most of the teams are coming in for, a short time, starting new businesses, and then may leave. Having this pool of local indigenous talent in fintech is going to make it much stickier. We're going to hopefully have firms that are really going to stick around and grow from Bahrain.
That's a very, very good point. And over the years, if I compare to a few years ago, where everybody was talking about Dubai. Everybody was talking about how fantastic Dubai. And I'm hearing this less and less, quite frankly, you know, especially in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years, where you see much more government alignment. I think Vision 2030 helped. All these things are moving us in the right direction. What do you see on the horizon? So what's next? We're now in the blockchain, fintech era, the Industry 4.0. What are we planning for beyond that?
Well, firstly, the comparison with Dubai. I mean, one of the challenges, but one of the opportunities for Bahrain is our size. All right? So nobody's going to come here because we've got a huge market or a huge pool of labor. But sometimes,
or a huge mall.
Exactly. But sometimes being small can be an advantage.
I agree 100%.
Right? Because being small means that you don't have to be an Amazon Web Services or a Huawei to have access to decision makers, to have access to the central bank. If you're a fintech startup, you can still talk to the central bank and they'll listen and shape the regulations in some cases to accommodate your business. So being small means that when we want to, we can really adopt a Team Bahrain approach. And that's what One Amazon Web Services. It was getting all the major players in one room and then working out what Amazon need to succeed here in terms of cloud-first policy, in terms of physical infrastructure, in terms of all the things that they needed to be lined up. When Bahrain wants to, it can really deliver on that, probably more efficiently than any other economy in this region.
So I used to kickbox for many years. And I'm not a very heavy guy, right? So it's an advantage because when I was younger, I was pretty fast. And I remember I had to spar against a guy who was about 6'7", okay, and maybe at least weighed 100 kilos. But I managed to beat him. And the reason is because I was light and nimble. And I was a good kickboxer, mind you. Okay, but my point is, yes, a small economy that is fast, that is nimble, decision makers are close to the ground, and so on, I think is a huge, huge advantage. So I'd agree with that. I'm going to go on with Simon for a few more minutes and then open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, please get ready for that. If you can raise your hand to one of the ushers in the room, we'd be happy to address. I'm happy to answer any questions, and Simon would as well. Okay, I want to go back to your kids. You have 2 boys. How old are they?
14 and 15.
14 and 15. What are you doing to educate them for the future? Are you talking to them about MTech? Are you talking to them about Industry 4.0? Are you explaining the blockchain to them?
They explain blockchain to me. No, definitely there's more I could do, right? On the one hand, they are, like most kids, even much younger kids, completely comfortable with all aspects of technology. But I come back to the thing that I mentioned earlier. They have to have good interpersonal skills. Mm-hmm. So just knowing your way around an iPod is not enough. Yeah. So what I'm trying to instill in them is that they've got to still be able to communicate effectively with other human beings. And most parents, I think, might find that a challenge because of the lure, the almost addiction that kids have towards smartphones and other devices.
I have a majlis in Ramadan, and a man came to my majlis, and he brought his son with him. You know, as we do in the Arab world, we bring our, you know, when the son is maybe 13, 14 years old, plus or minus, we start bringing them to these occasions because we teach them how to behave in society. So the man came in, and his son came behind him, attached to his device. And his face did not get off that device. And the man said hello, he sat down, his son sat down, and his son was sitting down like this. And I was thinking to myself, this is just not acceptable. This is really, really not acceptable. So we need to perhaps really invest more in these kind of things now. We took it for granted. We used to need to work on interpersonal skills. But I also want to add, what I mentioned earlier is critical thinking is vitally important. The statistics that's floating around that 2/3 of jobs will no longer exist in the next 20 years, we don't know if this is true. This is very difficult to say, and I forget the source of this data, but anyway. My point is, really, disruption has been happening for thousands of years. So I imagine the guy that had the first saddle, When someone, because you used to ride horses presumably without saddles, like the native Indians, the Native Americans. And then when the first saddle was brought on, someone must have said, come on, this is ridiculous, how are you supposed to? And then eventually they'd adopt it. Many people thought that the car was a ridiculous invention, that the horse would never go out. Books, why were books so expensive in the past before the invention of the printing press? Because they were written by scribes. So disruption is nothing new. The Industrial Revolution was a massive, why is it called a revolution? Because it disrupted everything, farming, manufacturing, the way work is being done, the schooling system, everything. So disruption is not new. So people are saying, oh my God, disruption is this, what's going to happen with the future? It's nothing new. It's been happening all this time.
But it's just happening a lot faster.
It's happening a lot faster, and we just need to be adaptable. I think if we are not adaptable as individuals, if we're not teaching adaptability to our children, if we're not adaptable to as a nation, then we are in serious trouble.
And creativity.
And creativity.
Cave paintings have been around for quite a few millennia, and we're still painting, right?
Yes.
But we mustn't only focus on providing the technical skills. It's that bringing together of creativity and creative industries with technology that I think is the spark for a lot of new enterprises.
And there's studies that show that children that do arts are better at math. Children that do music are better at math. Two of my kids play the piano, and it's quite a mathematical process. They don't actually need to think in a mathematical way, but it actually is quite mathematical music. So yes, you're right. Creativity coupled with interpersonal skills, coupled with adaptability. If we can focus on this for our team members in our companies, for our students, our children of the future, then I think Bahrain will be in good hands. Is there anyone who has any questions for my distinguished guest or for myself? We have one over there. If you can introduce yourself and please make the question as brief as possible.
Thank you. My name is Mirza Asrar, CEO.
If you can stand up so everyone can see you.
Yeah. My question is in reference to thought leadership and research papers. And how much do we need it in the region to make a difference, or are we okay with just replicas? Thank you.
Go ahead first.
Thought leadership as in sort of academic research?
Yeah, he's talking about research
and
papers and thought leadership. So
I'll just to elaborate on the question,
yes, go ahead.
Okay, Kareem is a replica of Uber. So how important do you think in the future, thought leadership coming out of the region? Because it seems we are lacking it.
It is something that we lack. It is going to be very important. It's also very difficult to replicate or build that up very quickly. The universities that are leaders in this in Europe and North America have taken sometimes centuries to get to a point that they're delivering this level of thought leadership and academic research. What I do think we could do, though, is maybe focus on a few areas and really excel in those. So maybe predictive medicine, genomics. Maybe there's a chance for Bahrain to focus in on a few niche areas and make sure that we're a leader in that. In economic development terms, it doesn't help to be a runner-up, to always be nearly as good as another economy. You don't have to be ahead in everything, but you have to be ahead in at least one or two things. So, for example, Amazon Web Services choosing Bahrain as their first major data region, this really was something that put Bahrain on the map. And during my time in Bahrain, which is only coming up for 3 years, I'm constantly hearing about Bahraini firsts in the past. All the pioneering effort that Bahrain has done in financial services. We've got a good history of it, but now we need to start focusing on new firsts, new areas where we can be a niche player, but be not just a regional, but sometimes a global leader.
If I give my 2 cents to the question, if you look at the ratio of research papers that come out in the West versus the Arab world or the Islamic world, there's no comparison. I mean, they beat us on a big ratio. And what we see in the West is a lot more collaboration between public sector, private sector, and the academic world. And you have research centers in places like MIT and some of these other places that are also receive government funding and very, very close collaboration. So I think this is something that we have to do much more of. I forget the statistic, but like Japan, a huge amount of Japan's gross domestic product goes into research and development. I bet you we're not even 1% of what they do. So I would say that we need to increase this, because how do we find that one or two thing that we're good at? We need to do also research for research's sake. I think is very, very important. I was going to give an example. I was talking about the collaboration. I had an example in mind, but I can't remember it. So if I remember it randomly, I'll say it again later. Any other questions? Okay, we look like we have here Farid in the front.
Yes, thank you, Suhail and Simon. We talk about ecosystem in Bahrain, and you're doing a great job. I mean, Bahrain is really viable now. A lot of things are happening. A lot of funds are there. Startups are building they are growing in their space. One point which is very important, Suhail, I think, put his finger on it, which was the education.
Sorry, say that again.
Our education system, is there a sort of a systematic way of involving the education into the ecosystem? You know, this is one of the questions I have. The other question is that we are giving left and right money to the startups. They come up with an idea, we throw money at them, but there are these SMEs who've been they've been in Bahrain working, and now they are struggling to sustain. Okay, whatever reason, I don't want to get into that, either technology or innovation, but we are ignoring them. And why is it that we are ignoring the SMEs and we are helping the startups without looking at the
If you can summarize. Okay, so the first question was...
So let me summarize. First, the ecosystem, is it complete or not? Second, and is it the education is part of that? The other one is about the helping the SMEs. And my proposal would be...
صارت محاضرة أبو محمد خلاص. I've got to interrupt you.
Let me finish, because there is
I'll give you 10 seconds to finish. Go on.
There is a fund of funds of 100 million. Sure. Okay. How is this going to help the ecosystem?
Okay. Well,
thank you.
First of all, is the ecosystem complete? No, I'm sure it isn't. But what's really good is that under this Startup Bahrain banner, which is not owned by the EDB, this is owned by all the players in the ecosystem. Under this, we do have the universities. We have University of Bahrain. We have the Polytechnic. They are very keen to engage and be part of the ecosystem. And I think we're already seeing big changes at the Polytechnic, where they're listening to the needs of major corporates about what qualifications, what skills do we need to be training our young people in to make them employable in the future. So I think the universities are playing a very active role, even to the point of using technology like blockchain, which I think you'll hear about in the future. So I think there's obviously more we can do, but I think we're having the right dialogues. And it's very much a community-led approach here, not a government-led approach. The question about SMEs, well, I think if we have colleagues from Turkey, they provide a lot of support for traditional SMEs in Bahrain, perhaps more than some other countries would have. Startups are a subset of SMEs. They are SMEs. It's just that they have the potential to really grow very quickly and make a very significant economic impact if they succeed. So we want to nurture and encourage this culture of startups with the hope that a growing number of those more traditional SMEs may also want to become high-growth startups. So, for example, they may look at franchising their product or service and going beyond the borders of Bahrain. They may look at using digital technology to reach out to consumers and understand consumers in a much more proactive way. For most industries, there is still a scope for them to reinvent themselves and become aspirationally high-growth, scalable startups.
To add my 2 cents, I think we have to be honest with ourselves. The economy is tough. It's tough. And getting paid on time, as all of us entrepreneurs know, is very, very challenging. There's a lot of challenges ahead. There's no doubt about that. And let's not gloss over that. However, I think to say that there's no support for SMEs does great injustice to the likes of Tamkeen. Honestly speaking, what Tamkeen does, it's a model that doesn't exist anywhere else. You can basically train your Bahraini employee on anything you want at no cost. That's just one of the many, many benefits that Tamkeen provide. And they do this for the SMEs. SMEs are struggling, yes, but I think it's the economy. Is it their lack of adaptability? I'm not sure the government needs to do handouts to them or give the subsidies to them. But I think something like Tamkeen there, we must give credit where credit is due. It's not, Tamkeen has evolved and continues to evolve. It used to be quite bureaucratic. It's less so, not maybe to the point that we want it to be, but it's evolving and it's progressing. So while acknowledging the difficulty, we must also acknowledge the good that an organization like Tamkeen does. Okay, we have one more hand up. Our time is up. I'm going to give myself permission to add 5 more minutes to this panel. And if anyone is unhappy that I added 5 minutes to this panel, speak to Riyadh Satir here and give your complaint to the CEO of Tamkeen, please, of BBK. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ali Al-Mishal. I think Bahrain have succeeded to put Bahrain on the map by attracting very much interesting business and companies to come to Bahrain. But what about the other side? How we succeeded to put Bahraini on the map and show what Bahrainis are doing? Thank you.
Before you answer that, I want to talk about this. Fundamentally, it's the Bahraini's responsibility to put himself on the map. This is really important. And I'm now hiring in my company. So in the last 4 days, I think I looked at 200 CVs. The amount of junk that comes my way, okay, with people not even preparing CVs properly, people not knowing how to apply properly, how to write a proper cover letter, things like this, not even making sure that their skill sets is in line with the job requirements. It is the young man or young woman's responsibility to make sure that they're educated enough. Yes, the government has to do its job, no doubt about it, but also as Bahrainis, and this is a message to all of you young people out there, it is your responsibility to make yourself desirable in the job market and to make yourself stand out. It's not my job, it's not the government's job, it's your job. Make sure you do that correctly. Make sure you have the skill sets that the market requires. And do not have a negative mindset and do not have a mindset of privilege or of expectation. You have to develop yourself. Sorry about that. I need to get that off my system. Go ahead.
However, I really feel that the Startup Bahrain campaign is about showcasing Bahraini startups too. And I would encourage you to take a look at the website, to connect with them on social media, because some really good Bahraini homegrown success stories are starting to get noticed. Whether it's Skip Lino or 1GCC or the food delivery companies that are starting up here, okay, they are in other places. But what's happening in the startup ecosystem is really starting to get noticed. What's happening in the fintech space is starting to get recognized. So yes, we do have a responsibility to all get behind and be cheerleaders for the very, very good Bahraini companies that are emerging out of this ecosystem too.
And I think it's just a matter of time until some sort of Bahraini Facebook-type company sets up. I believe that. One of these guys is going to be big, and we'll be very, very proud of establishing Bahrainis.
You know, my colleague John says we don't need to have necessarily a unicorn. We'll be quite happy with what they call a gazelle, which is a company that produces, you know, it has over $100 million capital.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah,
you know,
a few gazelles would be good.
Absolutely.
We have 2 minutes and 26 seconds. Is there any question before we wrap up? Someone in the back moved. I think he was fixing his ghatra. I don't think there was a question. Okay. Simon, I could sit here with you for hours. It's a very stimulating conversation. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the good work that you do for Bahrain. And it's a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you, Suhail.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you.